Wow. So Tim Walz is not going to run for re-election as governor. These are the headlines. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz says he's dropping his re-election bid. Now, he's not resigning from governor, and he's also hasn't been charged with anything, because there's going to be a lot of Republicans saying, oh, charge the guy, whatever. He hasn't been charged with anything. I'm going to read through what he says and what's going on, and let's jump right in. So it says the announcement from Walz, a Democrat, comes amid heightened scrutiny of the state's handling of the alleged fraud. And we're talking about the whole Somali situation with the daycares.
So this is what happens when your own federal government wages war against you. This is what happens when they target communities for their own benefit. This is what happens when they scapegoat. And this is what happens when they no longer hide the idea of white supremacy, when you hear the Vice President of the United States talk about now white people won't have to apologize for being white. That's never happened once in my whole damn life. And I think everybody in this room knows what they're doing. So we're here today to say enough of this. We're here today to stand that Minnesota will protect their neighbors.
Minnesota Governor Tim Walz said Monday that he is ending his re-election bid and will not seek a third term in office. In a press release, Walz cited heightened attention on fraud allegations in Minnesota, adding in the release that, quote, the political gamemanship we're seeing from the Republicans is only making that fight harder to win. But as I reflected on this moment with my family and my team over the holidays, I came to the conclusion that I can't give a political campaign my all. Every minute I spend defending my own political interests would be a minute I can't spend defending the people of Minnesota against the criminals who prey on our generosity and the cynics who prey on our differences. So I've decided to step out of the race and let others worry about the election while I focus on the work. My understanding is chances are Klobuchar is going to then run for governor. I think she'll probably have a good chance, but in these days, who knows what's going to happen? I'm sure there'll be other people who want to run also. The thing with Walz, I think there's a couple things going on. So one is, if you just take his words at face value, he's like, dealing with this particular scandal is, too big of a distraction. I just can't run for re-election. I think that's a reasonable thing to say. I'll give you another option, because who knows what's going on. Another option, you could say, well, he's too tied into this stuff, so there's a more Republican option. He's going to be charged with something, he's guilty or whatever. They're going to make their assessment on that, and then therefore he's dropping out. But I think if that is indeed the case, he would have resigned, which he didn't resign, and he hasn't been charged with anything. So I'm just giving you some different scenarios. Or three, just time to get out of politics. You just don't want to do it anymore for whatever reason. Talk with your family. Happens over the holidays. You've been in public life for quite a while now, and it happens. I'll also be frank with you guys. I personally like Tim Walz. I think he's a good guy, and we'll see what happens with this stuff. If things come out and he ends up being, charged with something or whatever, we'll take a look at that. I'll just be frank with you also. It's tough in this day and age because Donald Trump and his ilk like to charge people with all kinds of stuff, and oftentimes it gets thrown out of court. So there's that. If, however, there's something, certainly, we'll say negative, or Walz is tied to something, I have no reason to defending this kind of stuff. The same way I don't defend, like, say, the senator was New Jersey, Menendez, I think was his name, or the representative from, New York, Santos. Like, if there's any sort of corruption in Washington or otherwise, we should just find new people. As simple as that. We don't need corrupt people. And one thing I think that if Tim Walz is indeed, wants to get to the bottom of this thing and not be focused on just getting reelected, hey, maybe he's doing the right thing. So, and for the people of Minnesota. This stuff gets complicated, though, because a lot of people have their mind made up on this stuff. Let me read a little bit more details, and we'll talk about it. The major announcement comes amid rising scrutiny of fraud allegations in the state, prompting renewed criticism from Republicans in particular, right? So last month, a video from right-wing influencer Nick Shirley, which you guys probably know about this already, alleging fraud at the child care facilities in Minnesota. After the video went viral, Department of Health and Human Services announced it would freeze all federal child care payments to the state and end up being all 50 states. So I felt like this was some sort of plan the Republicans had in place to basically figure out a way, okay, now we can freeze childcare everywhere, right? And that was just announced a couple days ago. Maybe a lot of people haven't heard the news on that one yet. Days later, Minnesota Department of Children, Youth, and families said that investigators found that child care facilities in question were, quote, operating as expected. Okay. So I guess no fraud was found in these situations here. It says we're operating as expected, however you want to take it however you want. Dozens of suspects were indicated in 2022 during the Biden administration as part of a alleged $250 million fraud scheme with the nonprofit Feeding Our Future. My general understanding of this, I think it was as many as 60 to upwards to 90 people have been charged with this stuff. So chances are there's definitely bad apples there. I'm just telling you the truth on these things. The thing is with the Republicans, though, they try to make it like, oh, all the people of this particular group are all bad apples, which is just frankly dishonest and lying. So yes, there was some fraud here. And sometimes Republicans say, oh, Chris, why are you defending fraud? I'm like, I'm not. I literally just told you. And I just trying to have an honest conversation about this stuff. This is like an old thing from 2022. Could there be ongoing fraud? Sure. There's certainly a possibility of that. I got no problem like talking about this stuff. But I've always said that if there is indeed, we should, fund the government, fund regulators, fund people who do the audits on this stuff and do it in a professional way and do it with due process. And that would be any system that you have in USA. I want a system of courts and rules and laws, not just like this lawless mob land where, everyone's like, hey, I got a gun and I got a camera and I'm going to go make justice. Like, I don't really want that kind of world. It is, if that's what you want, I think you're whacked out. I just showed in a video, just literally just look at my last video. There's this Nick Sorter dude. He like runs around and stalks daycares. He was out in front of Walz's house at 4 a.m. this morning. He was like breaking, I'm in front of the house at 4 a.m. in the morning. Wow. It's like, man, these people are crazy. And then JD Vance's house, windows were broken in or something that was just reported news. And also too, talking about the situation in Minnesota, just to let you know the seriousness of the stuff, there were shootings, as you remember this, of politicians, like just some whacked out dude there. I mean, it's hard to talk about this stuff because I don't think people realize that the significance of the crazy crap that people say inspires Pizzagate kind of stuff. So it's largely inflammatory out there. And then that's why you don't want to just say, hey, a whole group of people is X, which Trump often does. And also why you also want to be honest about any number of these things. So like, again, this was an old story. And actually it's interesting because I remember when I first saw this story a while ago, and I was like, oh, okay. It looks like the Republicans are trying to pump up something old, right? I saw it. And some people asked me about it. And I was like, it's like an old thing from a while ago. And is actually reported before. And then the Republicans started acting like that no one had ever reported it. And it was just like so weird. And then my other first reaction is, just because you're illiterate and you don't read doesn't mean that no one talked about it. Like you can literally go on the internet and you can find old articles and stuff like that. So it's ugly in that sense. I'll read a little bit more here. A state audit report released in 2024 found that the failures by the state's education department led to misuse of COVID-era program. Some of the criminal cases related to the alleged scheme are ongoing, and several of the defendants are of Somali descent, which President Donald Trump latched onto in verbal attacks on Minnesota's Somali community. I'll just say this also that's frustrating about these issues is where I feel like people these days, via social media or whatever, are so easily manipulated to be like, oh, you definitely have to care about this fraud, but don't care about those other frauds, right? We're not going to talk about the other stuff. And, if you were an honest person, you would treat fraud like equally. It's like, you know what? I really don't like it that Trump's family is profiting out of the presidency, or you know what? I don't like all of these, crypto scammers out everywhere. You know what? I really don't like people, building data centers and taking my power, or any number of things, right? You would be upset at all of this stuff, not just selectively upset and then act like it's only one group of people. Or during COVID era, there was a whole bunch of fraud and all kinds of stuff. I think my understanding was, I think that the PPP loan thing was like a whole bunch of fraud there. It's just any number of things. But when the Trump people came in, like their first thing was with Elon Musk is to fire all the regulators and then basically try to take off pressure off, people that basically would bribe the president. That's basically what it ended up being. So then Elon Musk is like, all the investigations him would just disappear. And you also are in a world right now where Trump sends, basically fake charges against people They get thrown out of court. He's been trying to do this against multiple of his political opponents, and it all just gets ugly. So, at the moment, Walz hasn't been charged with anything. I understand on social media they're all trying to, and it's actually, they say really ugly things on that. I'm not going to repeat it, but to say really ugly things of what, penalties he should face. And it's just a whacked out world that we live in. And that's just my thoughts on this. I don't know what else to say other than I hope we can live in a world where we can talk, just in good faith conversations about these things. Like literally I just told my wife, I said, hey, you remember the Tim Walz guy ran with, Kamala Harris? Oh yeah, I remember the guy. And he just said, there's some sort of scandal in Minnesota, and we'll see what happens with that. Like that's literally what I say. I don't automatically assume he's guilty. I don't automatically assume he's innocent. I say we'll see what happens with that. But he said he's not running for re-election. And then I think the big ones here, he hasn't been charged with anything, and he's not resigning. So we'll take him at his word, saying I'd rather focus on this mess I'm dealing with right now, opposed to just going for re-election. And that's what he said. I want to hear your thoughts on this stuff though too, and appreciate your time. And I'll catch you on the next video.